Our next presenter is Philip Bretz, and his topic is Worth a Shot, Targeted Killing in U.S. Foreign Policy.
In the 1972 Olympics, members of a Palestinian terrorist group known as Black September took hostage and killed 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team in the event that came to be known as the Munich Massacre. 3 of the terrorists survived and were eventually released by the German government. In reaction to this, Israel conducted a 20-year operation known as Operation Wrath of God. It consisted of 15 people divided into 5 squads: Aleph, 2 trained killers; Bet, 2 guards who would shadow the Alephs; Het, 2 agents who would establish cover for the rest of the team by renting hotel rooms, apartments, cars, and so on; Ayin, comprising between 6 and 8 agents who formed the backbone of the operation, shadowing targets and providing an escape route for the Aleph and Bet squads; and Kof, 2 agents specializing in communications. Wales Waiter, Mahmoud Hamshari, Hussein al-Bashir, Basil al-Kubaisi, Mohammed Yusuf al-Najjar, Kamal Adwan, Kamal Nasser, Zayad Muchasi, Mohammed Boudia, Kamal Hussein, Ali Hassan Salama, all members of Black September, all killed during this 20-year operation. Targeted killing is nothing new. It has only been brought to public attention in the recent years. The effectiveness of the Israeli targeted killing program has been a large part of bringing this to public attention. However, targeted killing has some of its deepest roots in history, particularly the Bible. A perfect example is that of the left-handed judge Ehud. God commanded Ehud to kill the king of Moab, Eglon. Ehud stabbed him in the stomach. Nowadays, knives are no longer the weapon of choice. Instead, we have drones. Drones that the Obama administration uses extensively in counterterrorism. It is estimated that some 291 strikes have been launched since 2009, killing somewhere between 1,299 and 2,264 militants as of January 2013. So what are drones? Drones are unmanned aerial vehicles. They can be used for reconnaissance or for strikes. They can be equipped to carry missiles or bombs. The Obama administration has come under fire for its use of this tactic. People are concerned that the government is overstepping its bounds. People are beginning to ask questions. Questions like these: is targeted killing moral? Are drones actually effective? Is this whole program even legal? While these concerns are not without merit, the targeted killing program and drones specifically must not be abolished. It must be reformed. Quite simply, it is the government's obligation to use targeted killing in appropriate situations. Targeted killing is effective. Targeted killing is moral, and targeted killing is legal. With appropriate reform, I would fully advocate a targeted killing program. I am calling for greater transparency, greater accountability in the form of interbranch relations, and a codification of policy, perhaps even on an international scale. First, targeted killing is moral. It's important not to simply ignore the moral implications of an action. To accept targeted killing merely because it achieves its ends is unacceptable. It is for this reason that we should view targeted killing through the lens of just war theory. Just war theory offers explanations and rules for what is right in warfare. Currently, the U.S. abides by just war theory. The use of force is governed by 4 basic principles: necessity, humanity, distinction, and proportionality. Necessity means that the target has definite military value. In the War on Terror, senior leaders of Al-Qaeda most definitely have military value. That is to say, killing them provides us with an advantage in our fight. Humanity. Humanity means that the use of force must not cause undue suffering. Drones and targeted killing in particular conform to this principle. They're designed to kill specific individuals, not to cause them suffering. Lastly, distinction. Distinction means that the target is a militant and not a civilian. This is perhaps one of the hardest principles to meet in our current fight. There is such confusion in the current war about who exactly is a civilian and a combatant. This is exacerbated by the current definition of a militant. And I quote, "Mr. Obama embraced a disputed method of counting civilian casualties that did little to box him in. It, in effect, counts all military-age males within a strike zone as combatants, unless there's evidence posthumously proving them otherwise. While there is much justification for this practice, it does artificially lower the civilian death count, which brings me to my next principle. Proportionality. Proportionality means that the anticipated collateral damage of an action cannot exceed the anticipated military advantage. What this means is that when considering a strike, the government has to think about whether the cost of civilian life is excessive in comparison to the military advantage it will gain us. This means the problem with drone warfare is that there is such a wide range of estimates of civilian deaths. For example, some official Pakistani sources claim that 700 innocents were killed in 2009 alone, while US government sources claim that fewer than 30 civilians were killed from May 2008 to May 2010. This is probably the single most debated issue in drone warfare. The critics point to examples of high costs to civilians and high civilian death ratios, while the administration responds with examples of how they saved innocent lives and low civilian death ratios. Regardless, there are definite situations when targeted killing is morally acceptable. A perfect, well-known example of this is the killing of Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden had definite military value because he was one of the senior-most leaders of Al-Qaeda. His death was not inhumane, and he was most definitely a militant. Lastly, the operation caused very few additional casualties. Another example occurred in World War II. In World War II, the US intercepted communications regarding the whereabouts of Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. They then shot down his plane. These are just a few examples of target killing that is morally acceptable according to just war theory. Additionally, target killing is not only morally acceptable, but in some cases, it is morally obligatory. If we can do a drone strike, instead of mounting a costly assault on the enemy, then we should do so. Why attack in such a way that leaves mothers back home waiting for a son who will never return? Spouses weeping when they hear the agonizing news? Children growing up without a mother or a father? Drone warfare is immensely preferable to the loss of the lives of our soldiers. Second, targeted killing is effective. Targeted killing takes out senior leaders of Al-Qaeda, forcing less experienced members to replace them. That is, if they are even replaceable. As John Brennan said in his John Brennan, the current CIA director and then head of the President's Homeland Security Council, said in his introduction of the the Obama policy on drone warfare, with its most skilled and experienced commanders being lost so quickly, al-Qaeda has had trouble replacing them. This is one of the many conclusions we have been able to draw from documents seized at bin Laden's compound. For example, bin Laden worried about, and I quote, the rise of lower leaders who are not as experienced, and that this would lead to the repeat of future mistakes. Bin Laden himself was worried about the future of al-Qaeda. That says something about the effectiveness of our program. And while drone warfare and targeted killing is only a part of the vast puzzle of counterterrorism, it is an important one. Second, drones themselves are powerful weapons. I will again quote John Brennan. Remotely piloted aircraft in particular can be a wise choice because of geography, with their ability to fly hundreds of miles over the most treacherous terrain, strike their targets with astonishing precision, and then return to base. As I talked about earlier, drones also inherently save the lives of US soldiers. If a drone is shot down, equipment is lost. If a plane is shot down, the lives of the pilot and any aboard are lost. Drone warfare saves lives, and it also saves money. Let me posit a situation to you. A senior leader of al-Qaeda is holed up in Afghanistan, holed up in the wilderness. We could choose to mount a costly assault on him, assault that would be costly both in lives and in money. Or we could choose to launch a drone against him. Which would you choose? This is the decision that is being made every day. Third, targeted killing is legal. We are a nation governed by laws. We adhere to the Constitution. However, many doubt the legality of the Obama administration's targeted killing program, and rightly so. Perhaps the single most important issue I will bring up today is Fifth Amendment rights. As a law-abiding nation, the Fifth Amendment gives us a much-needed solid line that we should not cross. It says this: no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. What this means is that the government cannot kill a U.S. citizen without first giving them due process. Now, a perfect example of when this becomes an issue is the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki. Anwar al-Awlaki was a U.S. citizen who was directly involved in many terrorist attacks. As President Obama said, Anwar al-Awlaki had directly contributed to efforts to kill innocent Americans. He was involved in events like 9/11, the Fort Hood shooting, the underwear bomber, and much more. He was killed by the U.S. in a drone strike in Yemen. Because of that killing, the debate has erupted. The question: is the targeted killing of an American citizen legal? Attorney General Holder has defended the killing by saying this, that due process is not necessarily judicial process, and that all targets on that list have been given due process outside of the judicial system. While what he says is true, that due process does not necessarily mean a courtroom, there's just too much opacity in the current system to determine whether what has been going on is indeed due process. This in particular is an area that calls for reform. Ultimately, though, the targeted killing of an American citizen is legal if due process has been given. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about international law. Is it all right for us to use lethal force outside of a war zone? What about the sovereignty of other nations? Let me start by saying that currently the U.S. is navigating uncharted waters. There really isn't any international law on drones as of now. Now, lethal force outside of a war zone? The short answer is yes. Yes, it is all right for the US to use lethal force outside of a war zone. We are fighting a stateless enemy. We are not limited to the battlefields of Afghanistan. As Attorney General Holder said in his defense of the legality of the Obama administration's targeted killing program, our legal authority is not limited to the battlefields of Afghanistan. Indeed, neither Congress nor federal courts has limited the geographic scope of our ability to use force to the current conflict in Afghanistan. What this means is that, yes, we can use force outside of a war zone. Second, national sovereignty. The current US policy is that we must either have the consent of the nation that we are going to act in, or have determined that they are unable or unwilling to deal effectively with the threat to the United States. This is important to keep in mind that this is dealing with imminent threats. It is also important to choose wisely when acting in another country, to think about the political ramifications. These are things that the administration does. Now, our targeted killing program needs reform. We need greater transparency. We need interbranch accountability. And we need a codification of policy. First, greater transparency. We need to see what's going on before we can fix it. Greater transparency is necessary to see what is going on. When you look at the targeted killing program, we need to know the answers to certain questions. Questions like these. What is the decision process of the administration when committing a strike? What are the characteristics of the people on the targeted killing list? How does the administration determine whether there will be excessive civilian casualties? And what exactly is this due process that the Attorney General speaks of? When these questions and more are answered, then we can change what needs to be changed. As long as the targeted killing program remains to such an extent shrouded in secrecy, we cannot see what we need to fix. Second, the executive branch has taken a lot of power on in this program. To provide a check on them, we need interbranch accountability. There are two ways we can go about this. First, we can have greater congressional oversight, or we could have the executive branch partner with the judicial branch. I would advocate the second option for a few reasons. First, Congress does already oversee the targeted killing program to some degree, and if it had more influence, then there would be a greater bureaucratic process in a program that often needs swift action. Second, the judicial branch, if it partners with the executive branch in this program, can be used to alleviate concerns about Fifth Amendment rights. It can be used to grant due process when Fifth Amendment cases are involved. Now, codification of policy. The President Obama, has a lot of power in this program. And while he has made wise decisions, there is no guarantee that the next president will also do so. That is why we need a codification of policy. If there are laws made governing the process of targeted killing, then the next president will be bound by those. And we won't have future generations abusing this powerful weapon. Additionally, we want a codification of policy on an international scale because, as I said earlier, there is currently no real international law on drone warfare. If the US introduces that, we can help shape the current drones arms race, much in the same way we help shape the nuclear arms race. Targeted killing is moral. Targeted killing is effective. And targeted killing is legal. However, the current program needs reform. We need greater transparency, greater accountability, and a codification of policy. Now, perhaps the single largest argument against drone warfare is that innocent civilians have been killed. This is true. Drone strikes have gone awry. Mistakes have been made. However, this does not mean that we should abolish targeted killing and the drone program. Sadly, in war, there will always be civilian casualties. It is estimated that the ratio of civilian deaths for all the wars since the mid-20th century has been 10 to 1. That means that for every 1 militant killed, there have been 10 innocents. However, conservative estimates put the civilian death ratio of drone warfare at 1 to 50. For every 50 combatants killed, only one innocent civilian has died. While every civilian death is still a tragedy, drones have done so much to minimize that tragedy. Additionally, when the US makes a mistake, when a drone strike goes wrong, we look back over what we did and try to fix it. Again, I quote John Brennan. As the President and others have acknowledged, there have indeed been instances when, despite the extraordinary precautions we take, civilians have been accidentally injured, or worse, killed in these strikes. It is exceedingly rare, but it has happened. When it does, it pains us deeply, and we regret it, as we do any time innocents are killed in war. And when this happens, we take it seriously. We go back and review our actions. We examine our practices. And we constantly work to refine and improve our efforts so that we are doing everything in our power to prevent the loss of innocent life. Civilian deaths are not something that the current administration takes lightly. Another of the large arguments against drone warfare is that it causes anti-Americanism in places where drone strikes have occurred. Hostile governments and groups use drone warfare as propaganda against the US. Additionally, there's legitimate anger in places where a drone strike went wrong. In answer to the first, anti-American groups will always find anti-American propaganda. While it is important to take into account political implications of actions, and the administration does this, often the negative political impact of a strike is low enough that the strike is still a viable option. The answer to the second is a little bit more complicated. What about when we make a mistake? What about when innocents are killed? Well, the first thing to do when we make a mistake is to own up to it. We don't try to hide it. We admit that we went wrong. The second thing, we try to fix it. We go back and do what John Brennan says. We review our practices and see what we need to change, and then change it. And lastly, we offer appropriate reparations. While this cannot restore the lives lost, it will do much to alleviate anti-American sentiment in regions where drone strikes have occurred. Lastly, one of the single most important arguments against drone warfare is that by using drones, the US is creating and fueling an arms race. This is true. For example, India is purchasing drones. What is to stop India from using their drones against Pakistan? I mean, we all know that those two are not the most friendly. The fact is, we are setting precedent. We are telling the international community that it is acceptable to use drones in warfare. This is precisely why we need to reform our program. We need to set a good precedent by establishing greater transparency, greater accountability, and a codification of policy. We do that. We must bear this torch proudly in a way that other nations will not fail to follow. Abraham Lincoln once said, "I'm a great believer in the people." In any national crisis, they can be depended upon to meet it if they are given the facts. The great point is to bring them to the real facts. In defending target killing, I have brought you the facts. Thank you.